I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing next to what I gain. Come tear down every idol so this heart won't stray. Don't let me stray. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Threshing floor here on lambnetwork.tv. My name is Darryl Weinberg. And this morning, I am actually wearing a T-shirt that I got from Uganda. It's Lion of Judah Healing Center. It was one of the churches that we ministered at. And so Pastor decided to give us a one of his shirts to promote it, because we say, this is a great logo. You really need to do that. So, yes, Yosana, I was just on the phone with Pastor Daniel's wife, Elizabeth. I've not been able to get hold of him, so I'm not sure what's happening today. So it looks like we might have to go solo again, which is unfortunate. But when you got the kind of schedule that he's got, then sometimes these things happen. So we trust you're all doing well. As I get my hand in the middle here, hang on a second. There we go. That's better. So we are in the 10 days of awe. And yesterday, for those of you who are on the Ruach HaMet broadcast, I spoke about how this is a time where it appears that with all of these famous pastors that are going home to the Lord, that there is a closing of the window of the opportunity to come to faith. The Lord said in Amos chapter 8, verse 11, that the day is coming where there will be a famine, and it won't be a famine of food or water, but it will be a famine of the word of the Lord. It's going to become more and more difficult to find the word of the Lord. And the reason is because there has been such an abundance through internet and social media of God's word. There's nobody in the world today who is not online. And even if you go to third world countries, like go to Uganda, for instance, everybody's got a phone. Everybody's connected to the internet. So the word of the Lord has been abundant all over the place. And yet we still have evil growing. We still have the hearts of people going cold. We still have more crime. We still have more division and hatred that is being promoted out there. Like I said, with these untold number of people who are celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination. A society has really gone over the edge when a good man like that is killed and people are rejoicing. And in conjunction with that, I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday, and she was asking me a couple of questions. And so this is what I think we'll zero in on today. She had sent me a video that I believe was of a synagogue in New York City. And the rabbi, female rabbi, was talking, and it was a very short clip. And it was hard to really discern exactly what her point was because the clip wasn't long enough. But what it seemed to be inferring, the way the clip was, of course, you can take things out of context and make it say whatever you want. The left has been doing this all along, is that she was talking about Rosh Hashanah service, and she was talking about the traditional passage that you read on Rosh Hashanah is Genesis 22 and the sacrifice of Isaac. And how what the rabbi was saying was that even today, there's still human sacrifice. We send people off to war to appease, the people that are, of course, controlling the war, to appease their gods. And I think there was somewhere in there she said that it's just kind of, the reason why Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac is because human sacrifice was done all around him. This was nothing new. If we were to do, if God were to come to us today and say, sacrifice your children, we'd be like, what? Have you lost your mind? Well, that's because it's not part of the culture. But this rabbi was saying that it was familiar to him, and she seemed to be saying that it is, acceptable. Well, I scrolled down, so it was like, well, what is exactly she trying to say? Because I didn't get the full measure of the message. There was only the clip there, but when I scrolled down to the next post, and there was a Facebook page. Shalom, Patty. Good to see you. Been a long time. There was another video, and this time it was from someone who had made a clip about all the different passages in the Talmud that are against the Gentiles. And so it was clear that this Facebook page was promoting anti-Semitism. It was very clear. So this friend of mine who had sent it to me, she says, well, what exactly is this saying here? Because she says, I don't know. She had been she hasn't really been on a lot of social media and been exposed to a lot of what's going on. Thank you, Irene. That's very kind of you. But she was like, what is this trying to say? Because she was asking me a bunch of questions regarding Jewish people. She knows, of course, that I'm a Jewish believer and we're in the middle of the holidays. And you've got all this fuss that's going on in the world about what's happening at the UN, Netanyahu's speech, and how people got up and walked out. And so she began to ask me a lot of questions. And I had to spend, a fair bit of time talking to her and straightening some things out. And she wasn't, it wasn't malicious or anything like that. She was just like, this is all I've been hearing, so I want to know. And I think one of the things that we need to understand right now is that we are living in an age when the spirit of Haman, the spirit of Antiochus Epiphanes, the spirit of Pharaoh is rising in the world once again. The spirit of Adolf Hitler is once again on the march. Not that it's ever completely been suppressed, but ever since October 7th, you have just had an explosion of sometimes rabid anti-Semitism from people who really should be in Israel's corner. I've mentioned this many, many times. I have spoken about the different Christian influencers. And some of them, are professing Christians, although clearly they're not, like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. Candace Owens has converted to Catholicism, which is the Mystery Babylonian religions continued. Tucker Carlson claims to be a Christian, but he would be a nominal one at best. There is certainly no evidence of him being born again, spirit filled. Well, but you've got people out there who are Christians, and yet the amount of animosity, the amount of intense attacks against Israel from these people, and if you were to only focus on their sites and their postings, you would swear that Israel is the most evil country in the world, and they are the cause of most of the problems. The Iranians recently have said that Israel is responsible for the flooding that's going on in Iran because they are, seeding the clouds or something like that. Well, it's not Israel that is seeding the clouds. It is the globalists, and Israel may be part of that. But what we have to discern and what we have to separate is legitimate criticism of some of the things that Israel is doing and what they've been part of, and the unbridled hatred that you see with people like Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uygur of Young Turks, both leftist fools who don't know anything, or Dave Smith, who is a comedian who has somehow positioned himself as an expert on the whole, Israel thing, even though he's never been and has no idea about Israeli politics. And I've seen him on Piers Morgan. And what I don't understand is how these guys get a platform like that. Complete mystery to me. So let's start out with legitimate claims of, Israel's faults. Number one, it is a fairly well-known fact that Israel was responsible for the setting up of Hamas. And they did so as a counter to the PLO under Yasser Arafat. And setting up a terrorist organization to fight another terrorist organization is that's dumb. Israel has been known to fund Hamas in the past as this counter to the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority, I guess it's called now, under Mahmoud Abbas. And what is the objective? What is the reasoning behind that? Well, Israel is against a two-state solution, which is what the world has been trying to impose upon them ever since the 1948 war. And by the way, there were two states that were established in 1947 at the United Nations. You had Israel and you had Transjordan, now called Jordan. Jordan was the Palestinian state and Israel was the Jewish state. Well, the Arabs weren't going to have any of that. And there was a blog article that I put on my website. You can go to alttnmessianic.com and look at what I've written there about this, the history of this conflict over there. So in 1948, when Israel declares its independence, immediately 5 Arab nations, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan, they all attack. And Israel miraculously wins that war. And so they start to gain territory. And then you have the Suez Canal crisis back in 1956, where Israel ends up taking that over from Egypt. But Lester Pearson, the Canadian Prime Minister, won a Nobel Peace Prize for convincing Israel to give that back. Foolish mistake. In 1967, again, Israel, through great intelligence, finds out that Egypt and Jordan, I believe, and Syria are getting ready to attack. And so they do a preemptive strike, and the 6-day war is launched, and Israel in one fell swoop, decimates, completely annihilates the Egyptian Air Force. They took out every plane in like one bombing run. And they take back the what is known as the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza. So in 1948, so let's back up a bit here again. In 1948, Israel was given the West Bank and Gaza. And it's the West Bank of the Jordan River. It's not the West Bank in Israel. So Jordan takes control of that. Egypt takes control of Gaza. And in 1967, the Six-Day War, Israel defeats both of these armies, and they take back control of those two lands. Now, the Palestinians, who were not a real people, there's no such thing as Palestine. There never has been a country. So all of these nations right now, like France and Australia and Britain and New Zealand actually didn't, which is quite surprising, and Canada. So Canada, France, Australia, and Britain, and a host about Portugal's now done it. I think Spain is so everybody's all of a sudden starting to recognize this Palestinian state. Well, there's no such thing as a Palestinian state. You don't have any borders for it. And well, they're saying it's the 1967 borders, which would include East Jerusalem. I mean, like, this is just madness. And they're saying, well, if we only go back to the pre-1967 borders, we're going to have peace. Except for the fact that there were pre-1967 borders, and there was no peace. So you have, oh, hang on. Dr. Batambuze.
Bishop Dale, I'm on the road. I've been caught up in the middle of in the middle of the road somewhere. So I'm driving to a place where I can access better internet because I'm still on the road traveling from the west back to the central, and I was caught up. So I'll be to a place where I can access better internet in the next about less than 30 minutes.
Well, we're almost going to be at the end of the show by then because we only have another 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So
it's been an internet challenge.
Yeah.
Because I was on the road.
Right.
I was on the road close to 400 kilometers outside my city.
Okay.
Yes, and calculations on the timing to a place where I would be where there's better internet, they had a bit of challenge and hiccups. Yes, sir.
I see. Okay. Well, so we can do one of two things, Dr. Batambuze. We can either do it audio only, or maybe we can organize it for another time.
Yes, sir. That would be a great idea, but again, letting you down twice, it's been kind of a hard knock on me.
Well, I understand you're a busy man, and there's a lot of altars to be covering, so so why don't we try to organize it for maybe next week then?
Thank you. I'll be so grateful. I'll be so grateful indeed.
All right. I'm going to hold you to it.
Next week, because I'll be in the eastern part of the country, still about 400 kilometers outside the city, on the eastern part of the country, but it's going to be, the program will be a little bit relaxed because I have a conference there which is called Gather Nations. People have traveled from different corners of the world to come and pray for their nations. So okay. I'll be running that conference, but the program will not be that tight because there's an entire workforce. I can create space. I'm just going to check into the program schedule and see where I expect to be having a more relaxed time so I can have this proper.
Yes, because everybody's really anxious to hear your talk, so we don't want to keep them waiting too long.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry again. So, but that would be great for me. Let me reach home soon as I land. I mean, soon as I arrive, I'll check into the time schedules for the next week. Then I'll send a text. Pastor Darryl.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for checking in with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, you're going to have to wait one more week in order to hear Dr. Batambuze, but it'll be worth it. So let's go back to what we were saying here. So Israel takes control of the Judea and Samaria and Gaza Strip. But instead of the other Arab nations that left their Arab brethren there, told them to stay, because with the UN partition plan, it was clear that that area was designated for the Jews, and this was going to be for the Arabs. But what happened in 48 was that these Arabs were told, move out of your homes. We're going to defeat Israel in a couple of weeks. This nascent Jewish nation is going to be eliminated at its inception, and then you can move back to your homes. Well, when Israel miraculously won the war, all of a sudden their homes were no longer accessible. And instead of them absorbing them in, said, well, okay, well, we made you a promise that we couldn't keep. Now what happens is that they've got nowhere to live. So they're now in refugee camps. Are they concerned about their Arab brethren? Absolutely not. If you listen to the words of Hamas over and over and over, they are saying the death of the Palestinians is good for our cause. They don't care about their people. Let's make this very clear. The Arabs do not care about the other Arabs. If it weren't for the Jews, they would all be fighting each other, because that is the nature of the religion of Islam. And that is the nature of the Arab mentality and culture, is that they're constantly at war with each other. They're constantly fighting against each other. And Islam is a religion of violence. It is a religion. Islam itself means submission. And you will submit by the sword, or else we're going to kill you. That's the only way that they operate. So you now have this situation where Israel wins this spectacular military battle in 1967. Nothing had ever been seen like that. And I would say perhaps the 12-day war with Iran was close in what Israel was able to accomplish and what they've been able to do with Hezbollah and the Houthis. But the 1967 war was incredible. And Israel took back the Golan Heights from Syria. And they've taken back all. But then what Menachem Begin, who was the general, Moshe Dayan was the general in charge in the 1967 war, and he immediately gave the Temple Mount back to control of the Arabs. And this was tantamount to Israel being able to go into the land and then deciding that they wanted to go back to Egypt and then having to spend the next 40 years in the desert. Same thing. So here they finally had a unified Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years. They finally had control of the Temple Mount, and they immediately give it back. And so now it has been essentially illegal for Jews to go worship on they've got the Western Wall, which wasn't part of the temple, by the way. It was an outer wall. There was no stones of the temple that were left. But like one mistake after another. But what you have happening in the world is this constant vilification of Israel for crimes that they've committed and for crimes that they haven't, made up stuff. Like I said, there was a show called Her View. Patrick Bet David who is a broadcaster, kind of got this set up, and it was supposed to be like a counter to The View. And you had a couple of people. You had Jillian Michaels, who was a former fitness instructor, and a couple of other ladies who I don't know. And you had Anna Kasparian, again, of the Young Turks. Now, Anna Kasparian, she is very articulate, but she's a raving lunatic. And I've seen her on Piers Morgan several times, and just like frothing at the mouth when it comes to Israel. Like, she's just, you can tell it's demonic. It's not natural to get that worked up about something that has no direct connection to you. So you have Israel that has been responsible for the creation and the funding of Hamas. It was also rumored that Israel helped Hillary and Obama create ISIS as a counter to the the powers that be. So Israel's had its hands dirty. And then we also have to deal with October 7th. Okay, October 7th was a horrific event. But we have to ask ourselves, how did Israel allow, and this was something that Charlie Kirk, right off the bat, he asked. He said, who gave the stand down order? And this was something that I asked right away too. Who gave the stand down order? Because the Gaza border is the most secure in the entire world. You talk to any IDF soldier, and there is nothing that goes, there is not a bird that flies over that border without Israel knowing it. And it took 6 hours for Israel to respond. It took 6 hours for the IDF to respond. So the question we have to ask, who was complicit in that and what for? So obviously someone within the Israeli government, and keep in mind, Israel has a deep state. Just like every other country in the world. They have a shadow government behind the scenes. Most of Israel's prime ministers have been high-ranking Freemasons. And so what we have to understand is that the people that run Israel are not representative of the values of most Israeli people. So what was Netanyahu complicit in that? I don't know. I am not sure. I can't say. But we do know that there was a stand down order on October 7th, and that 1,200 Israeli citizens were allowed to be butchered in order to facilitate this war. What is the purpose of the war? Is it to drive out the Gazans? Well, perhaps. And people might say, well, that's terrible. Well, is it really that bad that Israel would want to finally take back Gaza Strip, which is their territory? And as there's a man who's suddenly kind of popped onto the scene in podcasting circles. His name is Officer Tatum, and he's I guess a black police officer, and he is very pro-Israel. He's obviously a Christian, and he's saying he said on Piers Morgan, he said Israel has no obligation to give anything to the Arabs. They beat them in war. I mean, if you look what Israel has done with this Gaza war, they have sent leaflets to people warning them that there's an attack coming. They have sent text messages to people's phones saying, we're going to attack. They have allowed food to get into Gaza in order to feed the enemy. No other army in the world does that. None. And people are constantly talking about genocide, genocide, genocide. the Palestinian population continues to grow. So if Israel is indeed trying to commit genocide, they are the worst at it in any nation throughout history. Anna Kasparian is Armenian. And so she actually knows about genocide because her co-host, Cenk Uygur, is a Turk. So you've got a Turk and an Armenian that are combined together with their mutual hatred of Israel. Incredible. Just like unbelievable. I guess the enemy of my enemy is my friend or something like that. So this conversation I was having, all of this was preamble. And it's important that we understand everything that's going on here. Because what you have on a spiritual level is you have the rise of anti-Semitism all throughout the world. And that Israel is being vilified. They're saying, oh, Israel is bombing 7 countries. They're fighting a war on 7 fronts. Okay, so let's see who they're fighting. Lebanon. You've got the largest terrorist army in the world, Hezbollah, that's been on its borders launching attacks. And on October 8th, they launched thousands of missiles over the next several months. And they weren't involved in this war. October 7th was about Hamas, which is in Gaza. Hezbollah decides to start joining and firing missiles. So Israel goes to war against Hezbollah. They have the pager operation last year. One of the most unbelievable clandestine operations in the history of clandestine operations. How they managed to pull that off will be studied for years to come, should the Lord tarry. Incredible to be able to take out that many operatives in the way that they did. And between that and then the assassination of Nasrallah, while Bibi Netanyahu came over to the United Nations last year to give his speech, was just masterful. So they decapitated Hezbollah. They've taken out just about every leader of Hamas, including Yahya Sinwar, who was the architect, or certainly the general, for October 7th. But they also managed to get Ismail Haniyeh, who was living in Qatar. And they got him in Tehran. He was in Iran. He was in the belly of the beast. And they managed to get him very close to the Iranian presidential palace. They've been fighting Syria because you had Bashar Assad, or Bashar Assad, sorry. And he was Shiite. And when Hezbollah was destroyed, then the backing of Assad's regime fell, and his government was overthrown. You also have the Houthis who have been attacking Israel. And they're like, I don't know, what, 2,200 kilometers away or something like that? Like, they're a long way away. Why are they constantly firing missiles and drones and stuff like that into Israel? It's because they're Iranian proxies. Israel has also attacked some people in Iraq. Well, after, what's his name? Saddam Hussein fell and was executed in 2005. He was, by the way, a CIA asset. And once he outlived his usefulness, they got rid of him, just like Muammar Gaddafi. And for those who don't know, the reason why Gaddafi and the reason why sorry, what was his name again? I just forgot it. Saddam Hussein. The reason why Gaddafi and the reason why Saddam Hussein were taken out is because they refused to allow central banks into their country. It was all about money. They were okay with their terrorism, but once they said, no, we're not going to allow you to set up a central bank so you can steal the assets of our country for the globalists, That was something that was intolerable. And that's why the United States went after Syria and Assad. And they were going to overthrow him and also create a revolution. But Russia stepped in and said, Syria is too valuable to us because they have ports there. They have bases there. And so Obama and Hillary, doing the work of the bankers, created ISIS in order to try to overthrow them. You think you know what's going on. The mainstream media is not going to tell you. So after Saddam Hussein falls, then Iran basically controls the Iraqi government because it's also Shiite. Even though Iran and Iraq fought a 10-year war back in the 80s and over 1 million people died on both sides. All of this comes from Iran. Iran is the head of the snake when it comes to Islamic terrorism around the world. Qatar, by the way, is its buddy. And they're both funding this stuff. And isn't it amazing that Qatar is supposed to be the negotiator? They've been housing the leaders of Hamas. And so when Israel bombed Qatar a couple of weeks ago in order to kill all these Hamas operatives, just like when they bombed Yemen and took out all of these Houthis, you've got 7 different fronts, and people are criticizing Israel. Oh, you're just bombing everybody. All of these are terrorist regimes that are constantly working for the destruction of Israel. Now, I don't agree with everything that Israel does. I'm sorry. There are things that are being done behind the scenes. Hamas, Hamas is being funded by various regimes, and you've got all of these people that Israel has been a part of propping up. But if you take a step back, and I'll get to what this friend of mine wanted to know. When you take a step back, you understand that Israel, every single moment of every single day, is in a battle for survival. It is an existential battle that Israel is constantly in, that they are surrounded by 300 million people who claim the religion of Islam. 300 million. If you go into Africa, I had a chance to see this, that Islam is growing very rapidly there. And by the way, Dr. Batambuze, who hopefully we'll be able to connect with next week, in his book, talks about how one of the reasons why Islam is one of the fastest growing religions in the world is because it understands the seasons and the times, and it takes control of those things. We talked about that last week. It takes control of the gates that open up based on God's cycle of time and calendars, the times of prayer. But Islam is growing rapidly in Uganda. One of the most dangerous places in the world for Christians to be is, I think, North Korea is number 1. Number 2 is it's Somalia. And number 3 is like Sudan or something, or number 5 is like Sudan. These places are treacherous. So Israel is still acting in a moral way that its enemies refuse to. And yet Israel's criticized for it. You've got all these Palestinians that are being killed in this war that yes, they did allow to start. But can Israel really be blamed for producing a psyop? This is a legitimate question. I'm not justifying it. So let me state that on record. I am not justifying it, because you never use evil to get your objective done. But if you're looking at it from a worldly point of view, Can Israel really be blamed for allowing something or creating this thing in order to start a war so that they can finally get rid of this massive problem that they have had for generations, which is Gaza? Because the Palestinians there, and listen, they pulled out back in 2005. And I believe Ariel Sharon, who was the prime minister of Israel at the time, was struck down because of that. You do not give God's land that he has designated to his people to your enemies. God designated the land for the children of Israel, and he's not going to allow Satan to take hold of that. So when Ariel Sharon gave Gaza to the Palestinian people, he soon after that experienced a stroke, was in a coma for 7 years, and then died back in like 2012 or 13 or something like that. So Israel has tried the land for peace route. And as soon as they handed over Gaza to the Palestinians, what happened? They elected Hamas, in the only election that they've ever had. And with the billions of dollars of aid that have come to them, instead of creating, they could have had an area like Singapore. With the massive amount of aid that came in, and Israel left greenhouses, they had all the infrastructure that they needed. And what did they do? They destroyed the greenhouses. So any claims about famine right now, I have no interest in hearing. But what they also did is they spent billions of dollars. Instead of building up society, they created terror tunnels and weapons. And that every building that Israel is taking down now, and people are crying and baying at the moon and everything else about the terrible, they're destroying Gaza. Yep. Because every single building there is used for terror infrastructure. Can Israel really be blamed based on what they have to deal with on a constant basis for allowing this to happen? Now, I do not condone the allowing of 1,200 people to be slaughtered as a false flag in order to allow a war to start. You never use your people like that. But those tactics are used all of the time. Winston Churchill, after they had broken the Enigma code back in World War II, so they now have the Nazis' communications. And there were times that that Churchill knew about an impending German attack against British troops. But if he had responded to that, and if they had not gone forward and put the troops there, then the Nazis would have known that their communication code had been broken, and Britain would have lost a massive advantage. And so even knowing that the British troops were going to be attacked and probably slaughtered, they still allowed it to happen because it was for the greater good. There are some times in war that we have to make some very, very difficult choices. I don't condone what Israel did, but I also don't condone that the Nova Music Festival, where most of the people died, or at least the biggest percentage of them in any one area, it was also a trans music festival. Trans music is demonic. I don't know if you've ever heard it before. And there was a giant Buddha statue that was standing at the front of the music festival. And this was done on Simchat Torah. This was done on the last day of Sukkot, one of God's appointed times. And there was a party going on with another God being honored. You don't think that there's judgment that comes with things like that? And if you read the article that I did on my blog site at the ministry website, I cover this. The reason why God allowed October 7th to happen is because Israel had to wake up. You also have a constant attack against Benjamin Netanyahu, and that thousands and tens of thousands of people were protesting in the streets because Netanyahu was trying to implement judicial reform. And what was he trying to do? Well, in Israel, Supreme Court judges elect one another. It is the only democracy in the world where the judges elect other judges. The left and the globalists, and I believe that I've heard that Yuval Harari of the World Economic Forum, the little snake that speaks lies and demonic things from there, is involved in this because he's Israeli. He's got influence over there. So you've got George Soros and the World Economic Forum that's influencing Israeli politics. And you've got all these leftist judges. And so what Netanyahu was simply trying to do was reform the Constitution so that, like every other parliamentary system in the world, it is the prime minister, the elected head, that actually puts in the judges. Who puts in Supreme Court judges in the United States? It's the president. Congress has to approve it. In Canada, it's the same thing. The prime minister is the one. Only in Israel. And so it's a self-governing thing. Well, you can't have that because the Supreme Court is unelected. So everybody's criticizing Netanyahu and saying that he's a threat to democracy. As soon as they tell you that it's a threat to democracy, you can be rest assured that that is the opposite of what's happening. Netanyahu is trying to protect democracy and not allow the country to be run by a bunch of unelected judges. And the Israeli Supreme Court was moving more and more left. So people are saying, oh, well, he allowed October 7th in order to deflect attention because Israel was divided. And then after October 7th, everybody came together. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think that Netanyahu is that Machiavellian. But the bottom line is that Israel has been under attack over and over and over again. So this friend of mine, what she said was, well, she said that most of the elite, so we're talking about the globalists, World Economic Forum guys, are Jews. And this is what I had to say against that. And I said, no. I said, that's not true. She said, well, name me one elite that's not Jewish. I said, Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum. Bill Gates isn't Jewish. Queen Reina of Jordan, Abdullah's wife, she's a high-ranking member of the World Economic Forum. I don't think she's Jewish. The problem that we're running into is that there is a disproportionate number of Jews who are there, as far as the population goes. And there's also a disproportionate number of Jews who are communists. Many of the architects of the Russian Revolution were Jewish. Trotsky, whose real name was Bronsky, and many others. But what's his name there? Lenin, he wasn't Jewish. And all these guys, by the way, are Freemasons. And so what I had to say to this friend of mine is that just because there is a lot of Jews that are globalists and they're all Satanists, doesn't mean that's what all Jews are. And they don't represent Jewish values. So you can say, Jews they're part of the synagogue of Satan, and that they're not real Jews and all this other stuff. And we've gotten into the Khazarian mafia thing several times. All not true. You have a massive amount of disinformation that is coming out from all sectors, including from those who claim to be Christians, that are demonizing and vilifying Israel. And here's the thing that I want to say. Just because there are Jews who are evil, the founder of BlackRock, Larry Fink, he's Jewish. And he's the acting head of the World Economic Forum right now, I think. although the guy who took over from Klaus Schwab originally was an Austrian, former head of Nestle. Just because you've got some bad Jews out there doesn't mean all Jews are bad. And just because you've got verses in the Talmud that are critical and demeaning of Gentiles doesn't mean that's the belief system of all Jews. Because I hear a lot more criticism from Christian circles about what the Talmud says about Goyim than I do about what the Quran says. We're okay with Islam spreading all of its hatred and everything else all over the world, but because you have a segment of Jews, and this isn't to justify it, but I remember many, many years ago, back in 2001, I was in New York City, 3 months before 9/11, by the way. And my roommate at the time was a young Russian pastor from Nebraska. And we were doing some training to do some street evangelism. And what he asked me is, says, do Jews think that they're better than everybody else? And I said, when you think about it, every nation in the world at some point in time has tried to eliminate us at one time or another. I said, if that was the case, wouldn't you think that you were superior to everybody? Now, I'm not justifying it. I don't think it's a correct attitude to have. God's very clear. The reason why Israel was chosen to be his representative is because they were the least of all nations. And God made a choice unilaterally to start a nation through Abraham, because Abraham was his friend. But that doesn't mean that Jews are in any way superior. But if you have everybody who wants to get rid of you, you would have the idea that you're superior too. So it is understandable that there are verses in the Talmud that are denigrating to Gentiles. That doesn't mean that's what all Jews believe. And so we've got to stop trying to dredge up reasons to criticize all Jews for what a few may believe. Are there Jews that are globalists and Satanists? Yes. That doesn't mean it's all Jews. Are there Jews that are communists? Yes. That doesn't mean that all Jews are communists. Are there Jews that do bad things? Yes, of course there are. But at the same time, and this is something that Charlie Kirk would say, look at all the contributions. And Patrick Bet-David had an amazing discussion with Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is he's a white supremacist. He's a neo-Nazi. And he has been very, very critical of Israel over the years, got into a real spat with Ben Shapiro a number of years ago. His views are abhorrent. Even he came after Candace Owens, by the way, and said that you saying that Israel killed Charlie Kirk is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, even that's stupid, coming from Nick Fuentes. But Patrick Bet-David said, if you're given a choice between living in Dearmore, Michigan, or Boca Raton, Florida, where are you going to go? And Nick Fuentes, the anti-Semite, would rather live amongst the Jews than he would amongst the Arabs. Because the contributions, like Charlie Kirk said, that Israel has made to the world are they're innumerable. MRI machines, Jewish invention. Cell phones, pretty much the Jews, invented that and certainly produced most of them in the world. And the chips and stuff like that. You go all through the different inventions and what a benefit to society that Jewish people have made far outweigh anything that they've done that's wrong. And so what we have to understand is that you can criticize Israel without coming against Israel. There's a huge difference. You can be critical of policies that Israel has had without saying that Israel is an evil nation and like Candace Owens saying that they're demonic. Or guys like Hal Turner who profess to be Christians and saying that Israel is the problem of all the source of all the problems in the Middle East. Like, to even suggest something like that is complete lunacy. You come against Israel, you come against the apple of God's eye. If I was talking to Netanyahu, I would first say, God bless you for making the hard decisions, but there are questions that I have. And that's a big difference. But I still support Israel's right to exist. I still support the biblical homeland of God's people. And I still support the people of God over the enemies of God any day of the week. And our command as Christians, as believers in Yeshua, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. May there be peace within your walls and prosperity within your gates. So I want to thank everybody for listening to my ramblings today. And we will hopefully have Dr. Batambuze on next week if we can coordinate him having internet access. On Wednesday night begins Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. And so we trust that you will have a divine encounter with God. Shavu Tov, have a great week, everybody. And make sure that you check the Lamb scheduling for all the other great broadcasts that are on. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you can find this show and all the other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take a tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Darryl Weinberg, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
How can I ever complain? Forgive me, Lord. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor. Let it fall on the threshing floor. Everything that's between